Hi everyone. I'm just getting ready to go to sleep because I got done with my night shift at work, but I saw a comment on somebody's post here on Facebook on a recovery page that made me think there's so many times I've talked about parts of my story, and I honestly, with going through therapy and stuff, it's hard to remember what I've talked about before and what I haven't. I don't think it really matters as long as it helps people, but it's a journey. And as I've said over the years, I think that our secrets and our past and our unhealed trauma definitely can keep us sick. So I think it's good to see a lot of people in the recovery community, but there are always going to be people that have negative attitudes, people that project, people that have had experiences and not had experiences with people who've struggled with alcoholism and substance use and who don't really understand it. I think one of the best things I've done for myself is to become more educated about addiction and how it changes the brain, including alcohol, the way that it makes changes to your brain. Just so that you kind of understand what you're up against. It's not logical at all once you start to understand it. But there's a lot of people out there that are judgy and make nasty comments and say things, don't understand things. So the comment that I saw someone post today under someone's post about being sober, it was about someone who's been sober and like their kids were in the picture, and the person's comment was like, oh, why do the kids know, like this judgy thing? And it's like, to be honest, like I think even people who have mild, drinking, whatever issues, at some point your kids are gonna know. They're gonna figure it out. If you think that you're like a pro at hiding it, like you're really not, because there's so much perspective you get as you get older, especially when you do your own work and you get to know yourself and go through therapy. So the pieces really come together, and it's weird. Time is such an interesting thing. I don't know the exact way to put it, but it's like, if you ever watch Deep Space Nine, there's this whole thing about going through the wormhole and people who don't have linear time. And it's like, in a way, it's like in your mind, time can be that way. Like, for some of us, maybe that's a neurodivergent thing, but like my brain very much still can recall things from the past. And I do experience hyperphantasia and have very good memory. So I can't imagine what it's like to be a person that just doesn't have visual. I know people who have aphantasia and they don't visualize things in their mind, but that doesn't mean they don't experience memories in different ways. But I will say, like, it's been very full circle for me. I don't know if that's a good thing. I am aware of it though. Like, it's been quite a, they say life is kind of like a spiral, and hopefully, like, if you're doing work, that spiral is kind of like you're going around, like you're kind of like scaling a mountain instead of going down the drain. Hopefully we're spiraling up and not down. But yeah, like I want to say it's within the last 7 years or so that I started just trying to figure out my own mental health stuff. Especially because I've been through some very bad relationships where, when you deal with people who have addiction issues and personality issues, they will sit there and tell you that you're the whole problem. And I'm not saying I've never been the problem. I've definitely had things that I need to work on. But there's a lot of stuff that wasn't mine to own, that people put on me. So I was trying to figure it out and heal from it and all this stuff from my childhood. And I'll say, like, the first thing that I really I joined one group that was about geared towards borderline personality disorder, which, as I've said before, I'm not diagnosed with that, but I have traits of it. You have to have a certain number of traits to qualify for a diagnosis, and they can come in many different combinations, but some people just don't have enough, they don't check off enough boxes for that. So it's something I've worked on over the years, and I've improved a lot in that regard. And that was one of the first groups that I joined. But another group that I joined was like adult children of alcoholics, which was interesting because I still, not about 7 years ago, I was trying to, have my kid. So I wasn't drinking at the time. I didn't drink while I was pregnant, and I didn't drink while I nursed for 2.5 years. And I did drink a couple of times after that, but it's interesting how, like, for me, I know it's different for everybody, but like once I didn't drink for so many years at a time, I really, really disliked it because I was already on a health journey, and I was already on like a fitness journey and trying to do all this stuff. So like just feeling better in my own body, I didn't like what alcohol did to me and the way I behaved with it. But it's wild. So this comment about, why do the kids know about the parents' addiction? It's like, they know. Trust me. I had 2 parents who had drinking problems. I'd say pretty bad drinking problems. They met in a bar. People meet in bars and they don't all have a drinking problem, but some of them do. And that was my parents, drinking and other substances. And it's a weird thing for people. I mean, it makes sense, but it is, being a person with CPTSD, you don't always have a secure, like, safe childhood kind of feeling. Like, there's very few memories where I only recently have come back to me in the last few years of times in my home when I was really little, like under 3 years old, where there wasn't arguing in my house, because I was born, I have a sibling who's like less than 2 years younger than me, and my mom did not nurse for very long after that. And then I think it was just right back to drinking and smoking, doing other things, until it got to the point where my parents were out partying one night. They had some snow and my mom tried to grab the wheel of the car while my dad was driving and cause an accident, to basically off the 2 of them. Like, just the irrationality in the moment, and that's what substances do to you, is they make you very, many of them make you very impulsive. You get into the survival brain, the 15-second mode, and you don't stop to think things through before you do them. So this was the beginning of my mom. Obviously, the car was destroyed. My mom had to go to AA. I know my dad was going to Al-Anon, but I don't know if he went to AA himself or if he just thought she was the whole problem. I don't know what happened. I know he got sober and got into religion after that, which I think I've made videos about, but I feel like, or I've talked about in my posts, but I feel like he made religion his new addiction. It's like, let's just trade one thing for the next thing. But my mom went to AA. I believe she went to a sober living house, because I remember visiting there, and there was a bunch of rooms with different women living in the same house. And then she got out, and I don't think it was very long before she went back to drinking and smoking and using other substances again. And my point about it is, kids are very aware. I don't think people understand, especially the severity of many people's use And you have to consider, like, it is a coping mechanism for people. It's a coping mechanism that doesn't work long term because you become dependent on it. For some people, you very easily could go get in a car accident, break a bone or something, get prescribed a medication, and then get hooked to that. That happens to plenty of people. So we're all like one instance away, or one traumatic event away from having a substance use disorder. It's, man, if you watch some of the videos, I've posted them before, and I have a list on my YouTube where I have like all different videos that are about health and wellness, and many are about addiction. And I know there's one on there that is about the opioid epidemic, which was like after my parents' generation. They were more like the snow, like not the crystal stuff that came later. That was like, I want to say my mom passed in like 91. So I think it was like later in the 90s that started getting bigger. But I always knew there was always arguing. I mean, some of that is trauma and people who weren't modeled how to regulate their emotions. Some of it is people who had different, not just trauma, but may have had genetic brain differences. So we could be talking about things like, I've known people, there's a weird line between when someone's substance use triggers certain things in people, or if the brain differences came before the substance use, and then the substance use was the way to cope with it. So, we have things like borderline personality disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, and you really have to go get diagnosed to figure out by someone who knows the difference between all these things. And I mean, other than that too, there's a lot of people that are neurodivergent that cope with their sensory differences through use, alcohol, substances, and many of them don't know they're neurodivergent because we had a whole generation that went undiagnosed, like generations, like decades of people that went undiagnosed. So substances, alcohol, all these things were easy ways to fit in. And I'm not myself an individual of the trans community, but obviously I've had partners who are, I have plenty of friends who are, and in the queer community too, just outside of trans, like there is a lot of substance use. Like there's so many facets to it, and we could make whole other videos about that, but it's common and it's unfortunate. And I think it is starting to change with a lot of the online meetings and stuff, and getting away from more of the religious groups and into the things like smart recovery and some of like the Buddhist stuff, which is more friendly to people who, aren't into like Abrahamic religions or have religious trauma. So there's different options for people. I'm tired, so I'm trying to keep my train of thought going. So yeah, like I really think when the pandemic happened and people had a riskier or harder time doing in-person meetings, that there was a big explosion of like these online, I just realized that my internet's off, and that is why my connection's slow. Oh no, it's on. So yeah, during the pandemic, there was a big growth of online recovery content and meetings, and plenty of these meetings you can do online. You can find them like 24/7 online if you want to go to meetings. Honestly, I have gone to some, especially like the codependent meetings, because that's what I struggle with the most these days. Like I said recently, like codependency is like a substance in itself almost, like the way your brain gets affected by just hoping that you can fix other people. And it's kind of like there's trauma aspects to it, but it's also like sometimes taking away from doing your own work. It depends. And some of us are just people that care about people and want to help them, but you also have to learn boundaries. And like, that's being a boundaryless person is, I've talked in videos about it before, but it's not going to make your life happy. So yeah, there's lots of recovery options available online nowadays, but there's a lot of communities where it's widespread. So kids are not unaware by any means. Often the people that are probably posting recovery content, especially, I'd even say like alcohol, people know, like, there were things that as a child were so normalized to me, like what I thought were adults in my life rolling cigarettes in front of me and smoking those, to many years later becoming a teenager and smelling that substance again and it clicking with me that like, oh, that's what they were doing. They were drinking and they were smoking that. They weren't smoking tobacco. And it's sad to think as an adult too, like how normalized and how dysfunctional that environment is for a child, because I went through years when I was a teenager when I didn't smoke, like a year or so, where I just hung around people who did it, but you still get a buzz from that. So you cannot tell me, like, it is fuzzy and it comes back to me through therapy, but definitely being like a 3, 4, 5-year-old, 6, 7-year-old child that's sitting in a room on a couch next to adults who are smoking that, you are getting a contact buzz, which is not healthy for a child. And it's unfortunate because it is going to affect the developing brain of a child in certain ways too. I'm glad that we have more scientific evidence and knowledge now to know better, but that doesn't mean everyone does better. Because once you get hooked on that substance, especially if, you know, you have there's a lot of genetic components to it, but some people, their dopamine detox is faster or slower. And I do think that is going to contribute somewhat to the way different things affect you. And they actually just put out a study, I have to find it and try to post it, but that they've identified at least one specific or a couple of specific genes that are more linked to addiction and other issues. And we know too that we've known for years, and I don't know if they've made the connection on the gene yet, but that there are certain people who certain substances, especially ones that increase dopamine, cause psychosis in them. That's just the genetics of the individual. And a lot of times these people don't know that they have this issue, this brain difference, until it's triggered by this thing. And a lot of people will try to say, oh, it's not real, you know, like people must be doing other things. Sometimes people are doing the other things, but sometimes it's simply just THC. Like, that's what it is. There are a whole bunch of videos on YouTube where people talk about it going into psychosis from that. So people, even without psychosis, have a lot of brain changes when they're using substances. They can get very delusional, they can lose touch with reality, they can hallucinate, and we're not just talking about like mushrooms and those types of substances. Like, there's a lot of substances that will cause changes in your brain. Sometimes they can be permanent. Sometimes people need to go on medications to help their brain to kind of readjust again, because some of those changes can last for years or lifetime. I mean, we've all heard stories about the person who thought they were a cup of orange juice. You know, I've known people who said that they did like things like, you know, paper back in the day, and they did so much of it they OD'd, and like their brain's never been the same since. So the behavior, whether it's normalized or not, a child is going to grow up and have different experiences in the world and eventually realize that those are not the way everybody lives. I've realized this through my own therapy, and it's wild because it is like that generational trauma thing where it's like, well, my parents did it, and so, you know, like, it could be worse because they were doing this. So it's normalized by, you know, the great-grandparents to the grandparents to the parents to the child, and it keeps continuing to go until someone is just like, I'm not going to live this way. And it's sad because I know a lot of people who fall into their own substance use and addiction who had parents who also struggled with it. And it doesn't, just because you develop that issue doesn't mean that your parents did that, but it's very common for people to have family that normalize this type of behavior. I mean, in my own family, everybody drank a lot. Even when my dad didn't drink. And he drinks again now, which is unfortunate. He'll try to make up stories about how little he drinks or whatever, but it's like, at this point, as I've posted, he's got gallstones. He just, I used to have a lot of discussions with my dad about health stuff because I still work technically in wellness. Like, it's been my job to literally pick the products or recommend the products that could put on shelves in stores. And so I have a lot of experience in this, and then, you know, I have an interest in epigenetics and health and wellness. But I just stopped talking to my dad about it because he's a person that's gonna do what he wants to do. And, like, alcohol is not good for your gallbladder. It's not good for your blood sugar, which is bad for your gallbladder. It's got a lot of estrogen in it. Hops have a lot of estrogen in them. It makes your bile thick. It can contribute to gallstones. You can't make anyone make a choice that they don't want to make. And I'm at the age, as I've said to my therapist, I'm like, I have a child. I have a full-time job. I have a house. Like, I rent. Maybe one day I'll own. I don't know if I want to stay in Buffalo forever, but you know, there are reasons. It's definitely harder, and this is why I made my post about, you know, I have one therapy appointment this month. I just had it yesterday because of the holidays, which is kind of rough, but I'll manage. But yeah, it's like sometimes parenting is way harder than you think it will ever be. The lack of sleep ages you. I mean, look at me. I have raccoon eyes right now. It's like some of that is makeup that's worn off because I had mascara on earlier, but also I'm tired. But you want to do better for your kids than you had when you were a child, so it's a lot to balance. So that's, you know, when it comes to me and dating and getting to know people, I have like a 1 year. First of all, I'm not in any rush to give up my security of my home and the things that I've acquired. I mean, yes, it's a little harder sometimes, but I do have a rule of, it's like, you need a year to really get to know anyone, because it's hard for anyone to hide things about their life and who they are over the course of a year. They can. I mean, I've had long distance relationships where people hid things from me for over 6 months, but I feel like a year is very hard to hide something. But yeah, as I was saying, talking about people complaining about the children of people who have substance abuse issues knowing about it, they're gonna know. Like, you might think that you're sly and you're hiding it. I've known people whose parents had the shed out back, and dad at the end of the day would go to the shed and have some drinks and whatever else he was doing. Obviously, like, something is going on. But my parents were so deep in it when I was young that they didn't really even try to hide that. I don't think they thought to try to hide it. So it's unfortunate. I think I still sometimes chase that as an adult, like that wanting to indulge my inner child. And I think there's a degree of neurodiversity to that, and then maybe it's threefold with me, but part of it is CPTSD. CPTSD affects your brain differently, which is why it's hard to sometimes differentiate the difference between trauma and things like autism, especially when you're like me and you had so much trauma so young in your life that it's like, which came first? Though therapy has helped me to sort some of it out, but maybe I'll never have an answer to like which sensory kind of whatever things were innate and what developed. Though it is interesting to have a child now in an environment that is not hostile like I grew up in, and still see those traits. Like I still see what we call like vestibular stimming, so all this kind of motion stuff, like it's there, and I don't discourage it because I feel like it is soothing for my kid. So that's, still there, but it's very interesting. There are studies that have shown with like epigenetics how changes happen in generations from things that the parents are exposed to, even down to like there are studies about nicotine use and either parent being a nicotine user and a higher prevalence of ADHD in their children. I can't say 100%, but I believe the studies were able to show a correlation specifically from the nicotine use to the higher incidence of ADHD type behavior in the studies. These, I believe, were studies that were done on mice, which, as a vegan, I don't love animal studies. I know we're getting away from them, so it's a challenge. So sometimes it is what it is. So this is what I'm saying when people complain about like, why do your kids know? Why do they know you're in recovery? Why do they know that you had said, like, they know, trust me. As a very young child, I remember arguing, your parents think they put you to bed. Obviously you're going to wake up when there's yelling and screaming in your house. There's stuff being thrown at the walls. Like someone threw something at a door when I was in a bathroom, like a single bathroom one day somewhere, and it just triggered me because it took me right back to being like 2-3 years old and hearing stuff hit the wall. And sometimes it was objects and sometimes it was people getting physical, which is unfortunate. Like, and I talked to my therapist about this at one of my last sessions, but like the number of just straight up violent things that were around in my life as a child is insane. And I know everybody's got some type of story, but like the narrative, I think that the difference is like you get this narrative with all these dysfunctional people in your life that like everybody's got something. And it's like, yes, but some people have less traumatic stuff. So, yeah, I mean, physical altercations, things being destroyed in the house. I remember being 5 years old, walking outside with my sibling, being put outside with my sibling, which is crazy to me now. I'm like, I mean, yes, we lived in the country, but like, who puts a 5 and a 3-year-old outside and are just like, go play over there by the barn or whatever, because we lived in like Mennonite country. And coming back in the house, and it's like, I remember seeing, like those old like cassette tape holders that we used to have before we had streaming music. Like you had cassettes and they came in like the plastic boxes, and someone, I would assume my mother, because this is the kind of stuff she did, had thrown them all across the house. So we come in and it's just plastic broken all over the floor, like clothes thrown out on the road of the highway in front of the house, like just destruction. And there's a weird duality to it, because part of me, like being outside, kind of didn't fully understand what was going on, but I think my brain also kind of blocked it out because it just becomes so normal that, like, the yelling and the screaming and the fighting and the sounds of people getting physical, it's just like, that's just what you live with. And I guess some places feel safer than other for kids, like being outside, or like a big one for me. And this is still a part for me, I don't know if it's just trauma or like sometimes when I'm very sensory overwhelmed now, even if it's not because of a trigger, it can just be like being in public where there's lots of sounds, smells, lots of sensory things. I'll come home and I'll need to sit alone in a room with either no sounds or ASMR ambient and no lights on. But I remember being a little kid when all of this like craziness was going on, and going and sitting in the closet. Also, at one point we had like a wardrobe, so it's weird. It's like I don't know how many times they've made the Narnia books into movies, but I remember the version when I was younger, like early 90s. It was older than 90s, but that like going into the wardrobe thing, like I remember sitting in the wardrobe and like the smell of the wood in there, and like having all of the just darkness in there, the smell of like leather and coats, old coats, like shoes. It's such a strange thing because I think because my brain associated safety with being in that place when I was in a very chaotic environment, that there's something very comforting about that. Like shoes to me, I think when my mom would be happy leaving the house, getting ready to go party, she would always wear like, she had like, I don't wear leather anymore because I'm vegan, I don't wear animal leather, but she had like leather coat, she had like leather boots, big shoes. Like I still like shoes a lot to this day. They feel empowering and exciting to me. But that's always like when she was leaving the house. Like, you know, when she came back later or whenever she was totally toasted, it was just a hot mess. So if you think kids don't know, they do. And a lot of us will kind of have protective mechanisms that will kind of bury some of that. But once you start doing therapy, stuff starts coming back to you. And then you have to piece it together like a puzzle. And it's a process. Sorry, I'm getting messages. Yeah, it's a process that you go through, hopefully with a therapist. I'm still going through it after, it's going to be like 4 years of therapy in February. I haven't done any EMDR yet. I've talked about this. My therapist had said, like, show me recently out of 6 clients, 6 of her clients, I don't know how many clients she has total, but I mean, imagine you have people doing bi-weekly meetings, you're probably taking, or some just do it monthly. So you're probably doing at least 5 clients a day. Let's say you do 4 days a week, 5 clients a day, that's at a minimum. And so you're doing 20, 40, you may have 50, 60 plus clients. So she's saying out of like about 6 of the clients that she has, we have just have some degree of like challenges with processing things, differences in our brains, a little bit of like resistance to what would be the normal course of therapy that she would do for people, which is why I haven't myself done EMDR yet, even though we talked about doing it in about 1.5 years from when I started. And it's been 4 years now, but it's very hard for me to, everything's so visceral. Everything's very vivid in my mind, and the smells, the feelings, the visuals. I even told her recently I've been having a hard time listening to music because I have so many associated memories and feelings in relation to music. Like, I remember the time in my life where I can get myself out of it eventually, but there's a lot of stuff I can't listen to lately just because I've been through so much traumatic stuff in the last 6 months that it makes me like very emotional to listen to it, because it brings me back to the place in time. And sometimes that's helpful in my therapy when I get to the point that I'm ready to process that, but it's like there's a backlog in my mind of all this stuff, and I wish I could say all of this trauma and stuff that I've dealt with over the last 6 months is over. I mean, it's not completely. I think the hard thing is when you have someone that is telling you and telling other people that they want to change, and maybe they do, but addiction is hard. It's safe to people. Relationships, often for people with trauma and addiction, don't feel safe. There's an uneasiness in safety that they're not used to. And I get it, because I've talked about this before, that feeling that when's the other shoe gonna drop, like when is the bad thing gonna happen, because something bad always happens that ruins it. I used to be that person that would kind of test people. Like, I don't do it now, but when I was younger, I just wouldn't believe that people don't get mad. Like, what do you mean you don't get mad? And it's like you push and you push and you kind of push them because you want to see where the limit is to what makes them mad and how they'll react. And it's super toxic. Like, usually, often, a lot of people don't realize they're doing it. Whether it's trauma, narcissistic personality disorder, like, there's so many different degrees to it. And like, I would say, like, going and seeing a therapist and working through it and seeing what kind of progress you make is going to be very indicative of like what you're dealing with and where it comes from. But it's hard. It's even like relationships can be kind of like, they can be addictive to your brain. There's so many neurochemicals going through your body. I mean, that's why they say we have the honeymoon phase, and I feel like there's a detox phase from relationships too. And it's hard. You kind of have to sit down and think logically about what's good, what's bad. You know, the one that my therapist has me do, I haven't done in a while, but it's like, I forget what it is. It's like pros, cons, but there's like 4 sections to it. So not everything is completely bad or completely good. Like, something could be perceived to be negative but helpful in a way. I don't know. I'm still building up my skills. Anyway, I'll leave it here. This is why, for me as an adult now, one of my things has been like, I don't want to have a relationship in a home with my child where there's active addiction. Like, I just don't want to do it. Because kids know. I mean, even to the point where, like, my kid hasn't experienced it in my house, and I've had people in my life who had issues, and it's like, they're very good at kind of like living double lives. That doesn't mean I accept it, because like, they're doing it at one place and then at my house they're doing something else. Like, you're still, eventually you're getting that negative behavior from them, whether it's text calls, the consequences of like the things they're dealing with, the law, their bills, they're all those things. And those are things that they have to work on. But even if you don't have the explosive type of household I had, where there's physical, where there's SA in some cases, where there's terrible things happening to people that shouldn't be happening, and things happening in front of children that shouldn't be happening, like, none of that can be going on in front of your child's eyes, but they also see the effects to you as a parent. And it sucks, because like, I'm not the kind of parent that wants to hide everything from my kid. It's weird. Like, I grew up in a house where we didn't really talk feelings. Hardly at all, to be honest. It's so complicated to explain, but a lot of us had those houses. I feel like that was a very 90s thing, that it was like, you just getting it done, and like no one wanted to. It wasn't a very like feely generation, you know. We came from the was it the psychologist Dr. Spock, who was like, ignore your children, basically. Like, there is a degree of letting your children learn, but there's also a degree of teaching your child how to emotionally regulate, teaching your child how to identify their own emotions. It's still hard for me as an adult, and there could be some degree from neurodivergence. I think a huge part of it too, though, is that I was just not modeled how to identify my own feelings. And the adults in my life often lived in extremes. So it was, we're super, super happy, having a fun time, or we're exploding. And that's a scary dynamic to live in for a child. It's not a dynamic I want to live in. But I will now, if I'm having a hard time, I don't completely hide it from my child. And I talk to my kid about things on a age appropriate level, especially like I let her lead with the questions and then I answer, and then if she wants more information, I'll go even deeper in the answer. But we've already talked about substances. We've talked about alcohol. She knows about weed and cigarettes, nicotine, vapes. She just turned 7. Like, kids start young, and unfortunately it's because their families are going through it, the adults. And I hope that a lot more people get help from communities online. It's hard because, like, even those of us that are doing our own work trying to be sober, like, we can't do the work for everybody else. Like, we can offer them resources, but we can't make choices for them. And that's kind of like part of what I wrote about the other day too in my therapy appointment. Like, it's really hard. It's like to feel sometimes, I'm not discounting the people in my life that are there for me. I really appreciate, you know, what people can give me of their time and their energy, because I know everybody's got their own stuff going on. But sometimes as a parent, especially a sober neurodivergent parent that's queer, like, oh my God, I feel like I'm on an island in the middle of the ocean, stranded, and across the sea, I can see the shore of the other side of the mainland, and stuff is just on fire. Like, and I'm just like, I'm like screaming for people, like, to tell them it's on fire, and everyone's just like, no, it's fine, it's cool. And I'm like, but it's not. And that is such a frustrating feeling. And I have reached points of acceptance in my life. Like, I've heard a lot of people talk about it recently. Anna in my recovery group just mentioned it recently too, about like these ideas that often come from like Buddhism and monks and stuff like that. And they go across different spiritualities and mindsets of just like acceptance sometimes. Like acceptance that you can't control everything, and that the world is dark. You know, I mean, that's like, you know, when we talk about this idea of being witches and witchcraft and things like that, it's like these ideas of shadow work and all of this, like, there's darkness in the world that is part of the world, and sometimes it's hard to accept, especially when we build all these fantasies in our life around things. But I think that's the general thing that wraps all this up here. Your children know in some capacity, and if their brain hasn't developed enough, or they don't have enough life experience yet, they will put it together. Their life is a bunch of puzzle pieces. A person's substance use, alcohol use, mental health, all of these things are apparent to your child in some degree. They're just not recognizable to your child yet, but they are puzzle pieces that have been put into your child's life. And I'm telling you, as an adult who had 2 parents who struggled with addiction issues and alcoholism, one who passed when I was 8 from her own means, Like, I always knew. I knew from the time I was little. Like, before I really have a lot of memories, and there's probably like repressed memories in there because my memories are very vivid usually, but I remember a lot. 3, 4, 5 years old. So you're not doing your kids any favor by hiding things from them. I think it's important for adults to talk to them in a manner that they can understand. And if it's something that you aren't knowledgeable enough or you don't feel confident enough, if you can find some type of supportive group, therapist, whatever, someone who can talk to your child, your school, the counselor at your school. And this is something that my therapist has told me before. I'm not pro like separating children from their parents, but there are times when there are things going on that you're like, is this in the best interest of the child? And if you are unsure, if you know the school that the child goes to, you can always talk anonymously to the school counselor at that school. Let them know the child's name so they can talk to the child. They are mandatory reporters to CPS, so they can do a degree of what they can within their power. Trust me, I know, because I've been told by therapists before that it is super challenging and frustrating when they work with the counselors from these schools and get the stories from the counselors from these schools and how frustrated the teachers and the counselors are. All you can do is do your best. Trust me. I have called the police to do wellness checks on people before because I knew that things that were going on in the home were not safe for children. And when I was younger, like really young, especially when I hadn't been through therapy and it hadn't been normalized stuff and there was just total dysfunction and chaos around me, there were times that I really, really wish that I would have had the information and the insight to report things, in situations where I saw kids were it wasn't right. So now as an adult, like, if I see that, if I question it, I will, talk to someone about it and do what I can. I can't control it, but at least then I know, like, I've done what I can. So I don't ever want to feel like something questionable may be going on. At least if I talk to someone about it, report it, like, I know I have done what I can do. And after that, it's in the hands of the people that are dealing with it. And the system definitely has issues, but I only have so much within my control. So your kids will know. It's hard because it's scary as a kid who's living in these type of environments and circumstances. That's a whole nother thing that I've dealt with, not just in the addiction side of things, but the way I grew up in kind of like the culty, religious, like isolated sense with other things going on in my house, that like I didn't want to talk about things as a kid, and I don't know what would have gotten me to feel safe enough to talk to anybody about it, but as an adult now, I'm still doing the work. So all we can do is do our best to address things when we see them. A lot of us still have stuff to work through, and unfortunately that is kind of how the cycle does, like, perpetuate. That many adults that I know, not all, but many that do struggle with alcohol and substance use issues, have something or many things from their childhood that they haven't dealt with yet, or they have it was normalized and is still normalized to many of them as an adults. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I will just say it right now. My ex and I are on not great terms. I don't know that there's an absolute understanding between us, because I have told her I'm not okay with her, smoking, tree at this time because of the psychosis issues that we've had. And she's told me she's going to do it anyway. So I was like, well, sounds like this is something that we don't agree on and something that I can't mentally deal with right now. So, I'm going to work on myself and not communicate with you at this time. But, a lot, it's hard. It's hard. I don't think anyone wants to feel judged, and I am far from saying my family is perfect. I had people in my family who would get off of work and start drinking and drink all night until they blacked out. Every day. My family is far from perfect, but, not just my most recent ex, but I've seen other people's families. I go to their house and I'm like, whoa, okay. What's going on here is like this collective dysfunction. We all have some degree of it, but sometimes it is normalized, and it's very unfortunate that even, adults who are trying to get sober and clean up their lives, when your whole family is doing that, it's very difficult. And I remember one specific time when we were kids and my dad was sober from substances, but still in his religion land, that he got into an argument with his parents about it. We drove 7+ hours from Virginia to New Jersey, got there, my dad got into an argument, and I'm sure if he were to hear this, he would disagree with the details of how I'm explaining this, but they got into a disagreement about something, and my dad turned the car around and took us right back home, 7 more hours home. So it's hard. It's hard to get along with family when you're not all on the same page, and it's a lot of work to set your boundaries of where things go, and sometimes there's very little what's the word I want to say? The best thing that I can think of it is like just to make another Star Trek analogy, like in Star Trek there's like the neutral zone, which is like the area in between like one species, part of that quadrant and another species part, and it's like the common ground that people can kind of go in between sometimes, but it doesn't really belong to anybody. But like sometimes there's very little neutral zone between you and people in your life. Like I only have this much space that I feel comfortable interacting with you in, and that's it. Like I saw a content creator speak recently about going to their family's house for Thanksgiving. I saw 2 of them that had stories. One of them, who was in recovery from alcohol, some other substances, but mostly alcohol and binge eating, had said that they went to their family's house for Thanksgiving, and like every time everything going on triggers them, like in the past for them, especially with the eating, like that's when they would binge, because they would just be like give me the entire box of donuts or whatever, because like that was their way to cope with it. And it's like, it's hard because you have to find your tolerance area for where to deal with those people, and sometimes it's not going to be what you want it to be, and that sucks. Especially when you see other people who it seems like their families can get along. Another content creator, it's really sad. There were some things I didn't exactly agree with, some statements they made some months ago about something, but they popped up again, and they were talking about going to a family event for Thanksgiving, and someone basically questioning their version of sobriety because they have to take medication for other, brain differences that they have. And that helps them to stay sober off of alcohol and other substances. And, getting into an argument or disagreement with this person and their family about, whatever degree of sobriety. But obviously this person's working a program, they have a platform, they are stable, which I will say this is, the issue that I've had with my most recent partner. There's not stability. So Saying that you're going to do things your way and the way you want to do it without having medical professionals and other people in your life that are like, you're stable, it's not working. You can think whatever you want about it, but if other people around you are telling you like, this isn't working, like, you don't have to fix it if you don't want to, but those people don't have to be in your life. And that was kind of like my post that I made earlier today, is that it's like, you see a lot of stuff about relationships on the internet, and it is dicey. A lot of it doesn't apply to addiction. To say like, if they wanted to, they would, is really difficult when it comes to addiction and when it comes to the people that love people in addiction. Obviously we want to, but everybody has a limit. And recovery is a process. And like, for the people that are trying to get off of substances, they have to work through their stuff so that they don't feel a need to use the substance to numb themselves. For the person that is the codependent, you need to be able to maintain your own sanity and your own emotional regulation to a point that's tolerable for you and get all the things done in your life. We're not saints. Like, we're not these like magical people that are untouchable. Like, we have feelings, we have emotions, we care about people, we get tired, we get beat down after 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years of dealing with someone in addiction. Hopefully it's not 10 years, but it happens to people because they don't understand addiction and codependency. When you learn about it, you learn how to boundary up and deal with things better. And it sucks because sometimes that means cutting a person out of your life temporarily. Sometimes it means cutting them out of your life permanently. And it doesn't mean we don't love people. So I hate seeing these things online where they're like, if they wanted to, they would. If they cared, they wouldn't leave you. And it's like, a person doesn't have to hurt themselves in order to save you. Like, it's not someone's job to get taken down with you. And trust me, like, I've said it many times, but like with my mother and her own issues that she dealt with, I don't know if she was around today. Like, my life may have been much worse than it already was as a kid. But, kids know. They know. And, everybody's going to have a little bit different opinion, but there's been a video or more going around. The one looks pretty real to me. It could be fake, but there's one where they're telling a child who looks to be under 10 that his mom died from, use. I don't know if it was directly from OD or if it was from, SUI or what. I don't know the story. I do think kids should know. They will find out eventually. I think they will resent you eventually if they find out from someone else. And people talk. Like, kids hear stuff. Trust me, they're listening. They're paying attention. But I'm not a fan of these kids who can't consent to being recorded and put on the internet. I don't, personally, if I had it my way, anyone who's under 18, like, it's just, once that's on the internet, you can never take it down. And I certainly wouldn't have wanted the lowest moment of my life to be put on the internet, even if it is to help other people. Like, it's just, you know what? Record it, hold on to it. Let the kid hold on to it and decide if they want to post it when they're an adult. But I will tell you for a fact, like, that was a low point of my life. And I would never, ever want someone to have seen me have to get that information. That's terrible. But that doesn't mean that in my opinion, that I shouldn't have been told. So, I hope that over time, things as a society get better. I think it's going to take a long time, and even though I want to idealize and think like we can have this like great Star Trek universe, I mean, come on, even in Star Trek, like in Next Gen, seemed all cool, but there were people that were, addicted to technology. There were, in Deep Space Nine, there's an entire race that they have like, what is it, the tetracell white. So it's like they're feeding them this substance to keep them doing what they want them to do. It's wild. So I don't know that these things will ever disappear from our society, but not talking about them and normalizing them or pretending they don't exist is not gonna help. And I do understand too, if you have, a kid and you, like, one of my things is I have shared custody, and it's like I try to maintain, a level of privacy and stuff when it comes to like my kid's dad, the family as a whole. Like, I'm not going to put anything on the internet that is like, not safe for my family, basically. But I think there's a point when you're going to have conversations with your kid. And if you don't, they're going to get old enough and they're going to figure it out. And I think it's got to suck for parents, even though they may think they're doing the right thing at the time. It's not you don't have to tell your kids everything about your entire life. Trust me, some parents tell their kids way too much, but resentment sucks. I hope that everyone could at some point as a society have some opportunity to find something that works for them. It's not a one size fits all. There's there's support groups, there's mentors, there's coaches. Unfortunately, there are some parasitic people out there that are making money off of people that are predatory, basically. But, teaching your kids when they're young not to teach, I think it's a good idea to teach your kids to question things. And I get told all the time that my child is strong-willed by people at her school, teachers and the like. And my reply to them is like, I am not going to be ever a parent that teaches my child that they can't question me, because that is the most unsafe thing to me. And I'm sure my kid's not going to tell me everything all the time, their entire life. But as long as I can, I want my kid to feel comfortable to tell me if something weird or wrong is going on. So I will never be I'm not part of that generation of parents that thought that like treating your child like you're in the military and teaching them not to question you was a good idea. I don't agree with that ideology. And that's a whole nother, is quip the right word? A whole nother issue that I have with my religious upbringing. And I think a lot of people dealt with it worse than me, but I have 2 pages over there sitting on my nightstand that my therapist gave me that are questions about religious trauma. And I haven't even answered them yet, because I'm like, I know it's bad. I also have so much going on with all of these recent things in the last 6 months, all the stuff I dealt with my partner, just life, that I'm like, you know what? I'll get to the religious trauma stuff when I get through this current stressful stuff that I'm going through. Yeah, religious trauma is a whole nother thing, and I'm super glad that my kid doesn't have to deal with that. I also try to just answer questions when she asks me questions about things so that she can make her own choices about stuff. Knowledge is power. So I guess that's where I'll leave it there. Sorry if anything was triggering. That's why I put the warning on there. I talk about stuff. I don't need anyone's pity. I don't need anyone's validation in this matter. Like, it's just, I like want to destigmatize it for people because it does, even though I know cognitively that I'm not actually out on the ocean, in the middle of the ocean on an island by myself, some days emotionally it does feel like that. Cognitively, though, I know that the more I am able to build up the bandwidth to interact with other people and have them in my life, the more connected I feel, and like the less scary things are. I mean, to be honest, that was a part of the way I was raised in a very isolating religious environment, was being separated and taught to be afraid of everything that was different. So I think that when we are open-minded and open ourselves to more experiences, it's gonna kind of like help to calm some of that. Obviously not in every regard, but finding some little bit of connection in the world and experiencing new things. I've said it many times, but I think it should be mandatory that everyone should have to move away for at least a year from the town that they grew up in, just somewhere else. Just experience something else in life, because your little pocket of the world is not the entire world. And maybe that doesn't create happiness for everyone, because there's plenty of rich people that go all over the world and experience all kinds of things and they're not happy, but they're also like chasing money and ego and adoration and trying to fill a hole in themselves in some other way when they're unhappy in that way. There's plenty of people that are happy, but there's a reason that like people, there's like these rite of passage things in societies through different points of time. There's reasons that people go off on these like I don't know the word I want to say, when they go off to other countries and experience other things and kind of like leave their life behind, because it brings a clarity to you that you can't get when you're sitting in your stuff isolated from the world. And it doesn't have to be like that you go to another country for years to live. Sometimes you just go on a vacation for like 5 days and you're like, oh my God, I'm so ready to go back to my life. So perspective is everything, but we should not, it's really hard, because I know I just made a post about it the other day. It does sometimes feel safer when you're in your trauma, when you have CPTSD, when you've gone through something horrible. You know, trust me, the last year hasn't been perfect, but this summer like turned my life upside down. It was traumatic and unexpected. Not completely, but boy, was I kind of surprised in a way that things like turned the way they just so suddenly. I think it's the suddenness of it. But you can't just like live in your trauma and your mess all the time. You have to you have to not isolate. So I hope everybody has a good day. I don't know how many videos, how often I'm going to make them. I'm still getting my life together and reorganizing and decompressing after a lot of stress. But I don't like the idea that we have to go through pain, like, to better ourselves, but I think we can use it to learn from it. Would it be great to not have to learn the hard way? Yeah. Hopefully we all figure out ways to learn without it having to be so rough. Sometimes it's not in our control. But I don't want all of my trauma to hold me back in life from experiencing potential. And a lot of people do that. They sit in a place that becomes comfortable because it's what they know. And it is scary what you don't know, because it's what you're not comfortable with. Like, you know how to fight the fight that you're in. It's like, you know, I'm not a sports person, but it's like, you know how to play football, you know how to get hit again and again and again, like, because it's what you do. But, like, it's not what you have to do, and there's other things you can do, you know? Like, if you enjoy it, great, but if you don't enjoy it, like, you don't have to keep getting hit again and again and again by life just because it's what you know. Yes, there are other things in life that are scary and suck, but if you continue to sit in the same place forever and not grow, then you limit the potential of your life. So that's a lot of thoughts, but I guess, like, I really felt the need to comment on the stuff I've been seeing recently about family-child dynamics and addiction, and I'm sure there's a lot more stuff I could go into, and I know not a lot of people watch my videos, but I mean, if anybody ever has a question, I will answer what I can. Obviously, I have my limits. I've had people tell me, just friends in general, that they want to get sober and then do a total turnaround on me, and I'm trying to work on myself to grow a little more, to be more understanding of people, because there's definitely been people that I've cut off, and sometimes rightly so, because their dysfunction was so bad that I just couldn't have it in my life. It might mean you only talk to someone a couple times a year, because that's all you can tolerate. But I hope that people are kind of inspired to not feel alone on their little island. You can learn to swim. The shore is not really as far away as it seems, and I don't know, maybe it is on fire, but maybe it's just that little patch of it. Maybe if you go a little further down, everything's not burning down. There's got to be something somewhere. Can't just sit on an island and watch the world burn. Have a good day, guys.